Muy buenas tardes a todos. Soy Raquel con Save Our Schools Arizona Network, dándoles la bienvenida a Charla Educativa con Raquel. Estamos muy contentos de estar con ustedes hoy, con 3 invitadas que nos van a tener mucha información. Esta charla estoy muy entusiasmada porque va a ser un poco más bilingüe, porque algunos de nuestros amigos nos van a hablar en inglés, pero tienen información tan importante que lo bueno que ser bilingüe, voy a tratar de usar mis poderes de ser bilingüe y hablar en los 2 idiomas. So, hi, I'm Raquel with Save Our Schools Arizona Network. I'm really excited to be with you all today for Charla Educativa con Raquel. I've got 3 great guests that are going to be chatting with us, a little bit in Spanish, some in English. And I just really think it's an important topic that we're hitting today, especially during this time, during this important election time, about school choice. And so many times we hear people talking about school choice. A lot of our representatives and our legislators talk about how great school choice is. And I just wanted to talk to some fantastic guests that want to give us their perspective on what school choice is and what kind of consequences it has for our communities. Entonces, les quiero dar la bienvenida. I wanted to say hello to our guests. I wanted to start off by saying hi to Jessica Bueno. Hi, Jessica. Welcome. Bienvenida a Charla Educativa con Raquel.
Muchas gracias. Hi, my name is Jessica Bueno, and I'm so happy to be here with you, Raquel.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time. And then I also have Thomasine Cardona. I wanted to say hi to Thomasine. Bienvenida, Thomasine.
My name is Thomasine. I'm glad to be with all of you today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. And then I also wanted to say hello. Le quería dar la bienvenida a Verónica Monge, que también nos acompaña. Nos ha acompañado anteriormente, so le doy las gracias. Thank you so much, Verónica, for being with us today and joining us again to chat about school choice. How are you?
Fine, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, well, you know, I was chatting with my guests as before we went on, and I was talking about why I'm doing this and why we're here and why we're taking time on a Sunday during this busy time to talk about school choice. ¿Por qué estamos hablando sobre el derecho de elegir escuelas? And what I was saying is that it sounds like a great idea, and I really didn't have an idea of what school choice meant until I realized that, you know, it's the school's choice. And it happened to my children before they entered kinder. I thought as a teacher, as an educator, I had taught in different states. I thought I knew pretty much everything there was. And we had chosen to try private school for our children because we could do that and had the means to do that. And we're fortunate enough to be able to do that. And when we applied to our private school and my kids were tested, they chose one of my children and said one can come and the other cannot. And so obviously at that point we said, well, it's all or nothing. And we went happily to our public school where we found out that my son had multiple learning disabilities and they take great care of him and offer all of the services that they need for him there. But that's when I learned about school choice. And so I want to hear all about your all's perspective. Es cuando yo aprendí que el derecho de elegir escuelas a veces es la escuela la que elige, porque realmente tú puedes llegar a tu escuela lista para pagar la mensualidad, la colegiatura, pero si no te admiten, ellos no te tienen que decir por qué. They don't have to tell you why they're not accepting you, why they're not taking you. And so I think there's just a misconception about school choice, so I'm excited to chat. Estoy emocionada de platicar sobre este derecho de elegir porque creo que hay mucha información que está mal entendida. So let's jump into it. So let's get to the topic. The first question I wanted to ask you, what is your understanding of school choice? And, you know, you can chat with me in English and I'll go ahead. And once you stop talking, I'll say a little something in Spanish to just, you know, kind of summarize it. So adelante, Jessica, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So I would say that in my understanding of school choice is that families' ability to choose where their children can go to school. So I am learning, thank you for sharing your story and perspective, Raquel, that, you know, once you actually try to use, you know, your choice, that it really wasn't your choice. So, you know, that was my understanding of school choice.
Thank you. Thank you so much. How about you, Thomasine? Like, I know you know, we live in different communities. And tell me about what your understanding of school choices and what your perspective is.
Well, school choice has really been something that I had actually never heard of as a parent. I think quite often our tribal communities really don't hear much of what is happening in the school system, or how other parents are approaching the educational challenges that their student may face. And
Right.
so most often it's a push, and that push comes, not really by being more selective in terms of the education outcomes for their student, but mostly from I think from it's a push from within the school. And so when, like, let's say for my students, my children, most often it's specific to policy, and policy that means the teachers or the school itself has a way of handling students. So
Right.
if there are different like performance, if there's attendance issues, there's something in place within the school that says, well, this is an issue, and then the parent then responds is to, okay, well, this is what we'll do, or
Right.
well, what. But most often it's a push for a certain change, and often I believe it, at least from my experience, it has been a negative push. And
Right.
so my student particularly has been, in the past, we had to go to another public school. And
Sure.
so it's not really a positive
Right.
experience. And so, the term, the choice part of it is really not, you're saying it in one aspect, I'm saying it in another,
Right.
but it's definitely something that is very limiting, especially when it comes to our students. And so the full understanding of what it really means, I wasn't aware of it as a parent when my
Right.
children were in school.
Well, and I just want to add, Thomasine, that I think for, in our communities, I come also from, I was saying I'm from Nogales, I'm from a border community, and there are not a lot of private schools. So when you live in these communities, if you don't have private schools and you talk about school choice, there's no choice, because your schools are being defunded, but you have maybe one or two, or you have to drive out of your community, as you know, to go to somewhere else where they do have these private schools. So I mean, if you live in Central Phoenix, you have 15 choices, but if you live in rural communities, your choices are very limited. So the word choices is kind of, es medio chistoso pensar de el derecho de elegir cuando muchas veces no lo tenemos, we don't have it. So, Verónica, how about your perspective? ¿Qué es tu perspectiva sobre esto? ¿Qué sabes sobre el derecho a elegir, school choice? What do you think?
My understanding is that school choice is a tax incentive, tax dollars, tax funding for programs for families to choose, like you mentioned before, to choose where they're going to be sending their children, and they have to go through an application process. And also they qualify, from my understanding, is based on whether it's a child of military, or
Right. Yeah,
child
that would be for the vouchers, exactly.
yeah, or a child that has a disability, things of that nature. But my perspective on it is, that the whole point is that if there's an issue with a district, and there's an issue in a school district, then the solution is not to take the issue and move it somewhere else. The solution for our communities is to resolve the issue within our own scope, and with our own budgeting, and with our own resources, because all we're doing is, when we're taking a child out, when we're taking children out and moving them, especially children, it surprises me that it's children with disabilities, because it's not even to their advantage to be moving here and there. But,
Right.
you know, for me, the solution is not to move away, but rather to address the issue. But that takes time. Okay, so we're fighting for more monies into our schools, and this is why we're fighting. And I really want to say something here. I really want to talk
Sure.
about this, because we don't hear it a lot. But some schools are so underfunded, and the issue is that they're not getting the resources, and they're not, and they don't have the capacity to deal with some of these things that are happening. And so basically teachers are squandering around trying to figure out how to take care of this, and they're pushed to their capacity and to their limits. And so there's a lot of issues within the scope of the educational system, but mainly, what I see with these vouchers is a way not to address that we're underfunded in our schools, and taking money away from our schools is not the answer to what we need to be doing. We need to be working together and finding the solutions so that children are really not left behind, and that they have the quality of education that they deserve in the district that they are in. Because that's the issue. A lot of parents take their kids and they take them somewhere else because these issues are not being solved. And it's not necessarily always the district's fault. The fault is that they don't have the money to allocate these funds where these funds need to go. And so that is a real issue. So once we figure out and we can get funding into our schools, and education is given the same to an impoverished child as to a child that lives in Happy Valley or Deer Valley, then we have solved the issue. But until then, we will not be able to solve some of this education and the way kids are taught disproportionately because of the lack of funding, basically.
Oh, Veronica, you hit so many topics. I mean, you're giving me like little chills on top of little chills, because yes, and yes. And so many times, right, our parents that don't know, they blame the school, like you said, and the school isn't complaining like, hey, they're trying to do the best that they can. They're not saying, hey, the state's not giving me, they're just doing what they can with what they have. Teachers are working like, I mean, I just went back as a substitute teacher. I was sharing, estoy de sustituta de nuevo, trabajando en las escuelas, y es una cosa increíblemente difícil. It is the most difficult thing. I can see where teachers are running in the other direction, because it's been, and so sometimes they just say, hey, it's easy for our legislators and our representatives to say, hey, I gave the money to your school district, and if you don't have what you need, it's your district. But as you said, the funding for the last 20 years, it's been the defunding. And that's why I do this. This is why I want people to know, is that, look, the schools, the districts, don't tell me about administrative costs being, Arizona has some of the lowest administrative costs in the nation. Don't tell me that I gave it to your district. And Arizona has some, like Thomasine had said, policy. We've got some terrible policies where, performance-based funding, where if you do better, you get more money. So if you need more resources, you're being punished because you're not doing, these testing things so Arizona, I mean, that's why we're doing this. That's why, but I wanted to go back real quick. Yes, on all of that. I wanted to make sure that people understand que la gente entiende la diferencia between open enrollment, because people think school choice and open enrollment, right? And what are the differences between open enrollment, inscripción abierta, and school choice? So school choice like open enrollment means I can take so for instance, my kid was supposed to go to a certain school in my Madison school district, but we wanted to go to the school with the Spanish immersion. So we used open enrollment to take our student to the public school, because I can drive them, porque yo puedo manejar a mi hijo. That's already a privilege there. I have enough that I can drive my student every day to the school that I choose in my district. And if I want to take my kids, and I have the privilege of being able to do it, I can take my kid to Scottsdale Unified or any public school, and that's open enrollment. And school choices, I can go to a charter school, and I can go to a public school, and I can go to a private school. But you don't need a voucher to do any of that. A lot of times people think, oh, I need a voucher. No, you don't. You have school choice. School choice is free. El derecho de elegir escuela es gratis. You can go freely. You can go free to a public school. You can go free to a charter school, which is already part of the public school. And if you want to go to a private school, that's your choice too. Just don't use my tax dollars to pay for it. That's where we get sort of that's where Raquel jumped in and said, wait a minute. Now what's going on here? You want to make your choice, great. It's all of our monies, not just your money. So I just wanted to make sure people know that open enrollment doesn't cost anything as long as you can take your kids there. Arizona, it has open enrollment and el derecho de inscripción abierta, tú puedes llevar a tu hijo a cualquier lugar y también puedes escoger cualquier escuela. No necesitas usar un vale para hacer eso. So let's jump in a little bit more and talking about, so Thomasine was saying, I was going to ask you about how parents in your area find out about school choice, but sometimes we don't find out about school choice. As I think Thomasine, like the people with the people that, does everybody have a choice? Because how come some people know about the choice and some people don't know about the choice? Thomasine, you want to talk a little bit more about how, like you said, like, hey, this is a new concept to me because this choice thing is not really actually what I'm finding. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I think that, when you talk about, you mentioned privilege, a lot of our parents here in this community and our communities don't have vehicles. We do have a transportation system that is, because of COVID, is currently not working. So many of our parents rely on the bus school transport system to get their students to and from school. We have a number of public schools here. We also have charter schools, but again, most of it is, there isn't much discussion around school choice and what that really means for a parent. And so when you have a community that is, there's a high percentage that are unemployed or underemployed, well, the choices are limited.
Correct.
And then, so it just, I think it really compounds the challenges that families will face when it comes to what is really available and what the options are when it comes to getting this education they're wanting for their student. So for me, I think the one question I do have is, you mentioned that charter schools are part of the public school system.
Yes.
I did not know that. That is something that is very new to me. Yes. And so this kind of comes, we have the number of students who are in school, and where, like for Indigenous students and those that are military families, the schools get funding. Yeah. And so depending on where the school, where the student attends, those funds are going to be transferred, so to speak. So I think that also kind of puts challenges on public schools, depending on where a student is going to go. And I think as a parent, when you really don't understand how the services you're looking for, how the support you're looking for your student, and then you move your child, you're making a decision based on maybe something that is forcing you. There's, you're having to move, or maybe there was a change in jobs or something, but you're not connecting how your student's funding and how the services or the support that the programs that are available in one school and not another are there. And so I think that's something that is also happening. that pulls away from the public schools, because we as
Right.
parents, like I was saying about myself, we're not fully informed or fully aware of what's really available.
Right. And I'm just going to say this before I go over to Jessica and talk to her a little bit more about this. I want to say, like you said, I did it, when charter schools at being public schools, I want to say this. So charter schools get public school money, but they don't play by the same public school rules. Okay. I want to make sure we say that. So
Mhm.
because they get the public school dollars doesn't mean that they, a lot of times our representatives talk about fair competition, school choice. If we create fair competition between the private schools and the charter schools, and the private schools, then that'll make the public schools be better. But it's not a fair competition, because public schools have to disclose every single penny of everything they do, certified teachers, all of these rules, open meetings. Charter schools, they don't have to do that. Charter schools take the money, but they don't have to have open, they don't have open meeting laws. They don't have to take all students. They don't have to tell you how their teachers are certified. They don't have to tell you how they spend the money. So of course it definitely affects our public schools, because once that money leaves, as you were saying, Thomasine, if that student ends up coming back because it didn't work out at that other school, the money doesn't come back. The money stays with the school that the student moved to. And no one's being like, oh, okay, now you've moved back to public school. Let's prorate this amount and give the public school. So now the school's educating a student who they cannot turn them away, because we don't have, private schools can turn students away. Charter schools can turn students away, but public schools cannot, which of course they want, many of the majority of our special education students are educated in a public school and are getting what they need in a public school, so, no matter how high the costs are. So that's the difference between, okay, yep, charters, yeah, they get the public school dollars, but that's a story for another day. And then we have the ESA vouchers, which again are things that, but I started to learn all about all of this just by going down to the legislature and being like, you could do what? No, how much money? 264 million a year? And it's growing. So that's why I went from being a teacher and being in the trenches to being more of an advocate to tell everybody, hey, do you guys know what's going on with your tax dollars? Jessica, what do you think about, back to the voucher, to the school choice thing? And did you, do parents in your area, I know that you work with the community, how do people find out about school choice, or how do they maybe get the misconceptions about school choice? What do you think?
Yeah. So the families that I serve, I work in community development in the downtown area. So I serve the families just south of downtown, which is known as Central City South. And we have the highest concentration of public housing in this area. And so, this is the Phoenix Elementary School District. And in our district, we actually do have a number of charter schools that are impacting our enrollment. So the way that families are hearing about charters or school choice is that, they're kind of being recruited, or the families are already looking for a different alternative because either, their child has a special need, the school's not meeting, the children's needs. And so because I get to work with families in different areas of downtown, so I work in communities on the east end, on the southern end of downtown. And so I've just seen how different families are capable to manage the different choices. So I've had parents and families that have had really good experiences,
Right.
and charter schools meeting their needs.
Sure.
And I've also had, other families where it's a single mother, and at that time that school choice may seem like a good idea, but in reality it's a little bit harder because transportation isn't provided, which she wasn't aware of, or she wasn't aware that nutrition isn't provided.
Right.
So it's like other strains that at the time make sense, but long term it's just more defeating and more difficult. So like you said, they'll leave for a period of time, but then they'll come back.
Right. They come back because they didn't work out, right? It didn't work out. Something didn't work out between it. And then they go back. And the school, has no funding and has to educate that student. And I wanted to just touch a little bit on what Jessica was saying about, you know, the recruiting and a lot of our communities feeling like, you know, that private, you know, they come from Mexico, they come from different parts of Latin America, and they think in no, go away, phone. They think that private, you know, in a lot of our Latin American countries, private school is better, and you have to go to private school to do something in your life, and you have to, you know, that's the only system that really works because their public schools are so terrible. And so when they come here, they want to see the uniforms, they want to see sort of that private school feel, which charters give. And I wanted to say there are great charters, but then there are charters that you show up and the doors are closed, right? They, after 100 days, they've cashed their check, they've
Yep.
gotten the money. And we hear every year about after the 100th day, this charter school closed up and went off with hundreds of millions of dollars. And the students now have to return to the public school, and the money is in the pocket of somebody, but not of our students. So Veronica, what do you think about your community and how people are getting maybe, you know, maybe thinking that, okay, school choice is great. And what do you think about them being recruited to these other systems? Because right now, really estamos invirtiendo in a three-part, right? We're funding our public schools, not that great. We're funding our charter schools because we're using money on them. And then we actually are funding our private schools because as Veronica was mentioning, we have hundreds of millions of dollars that go to pay for private school tuition in the form of ESA vouchers. So what do you think about all this, Veronica? Tell us a little bit more.
Well, you know, in our communities, unfortunately, with the people that I serve and the families that I serve when I'm working out in the community are folks that are running into situations where, as Jessica mentioned, the school is not meeting their needs. And so a lot of times, you know, the parents are not aware that they have choices until they start asking questions, and we go to the school and we ask the school, okay, what resources do you have? And based on the location of the school, we get different answers. So it all boils back to the budget and the funding, right? Because every district chooses to spend and allocate monies to different resources. So, and working with the families and the charter schools and this choice that we're talking about, it's fairly new. I think for a lot of communities and a lot of families that, you know, really don't understand. You were talking about open enrollment and you were talking about that as well. So a lot of parents, you know, they get confused about all that, and they get confused about the vouchers and everything, you know, and sometimes the schools, they get to their cap. So they can't accept a child. It is free, but they can't accept a child unless they have room in the classroom to accept this child, number one. Number two, the parent has to spend monies unless they're under the McKinney-Vento Act. They have to spend monies to get to the school. And number three, there are special requirements. The child has to meet the attendance requirements, the behavior requirements, and a lot of times schools will not take children with IEP, and a lot of times schools do not want to pay for IEPs, period. So these are some of the things that I run into where, like, let's get to the real talk. The real talk is that we need funding. We need money in our public schools. For what? We need them for children to be tested, okay? And so that we don't run into these barriers, and so we don't have to call, you know, like Families Raising Special Kids or other entities to come and do something that we should be already doing in our schools.
Right.
This is why it gives an opportunity for those that want to promote charter schools and make them look good, and private schools make them look good. This is why they're able to, you know, come with these messages and be like, oh, you know what, we can provide better. But as a parent, I'm going to tell you one thing. I would not take my child to a charter school because I don't have access to the teacher's information. And that's a big thing. I want to be able to walk to that district office and ask, can I look at this teacher's history? Can I see, you know, their standards and what they know, right?
Are they certified?
Are they certified? And that's a big one for me. Is who are they pulling into the classroom? Are they certified teachers? You know, are they qualified to be in the room? Because in public schools, you have to be certified and you have to be a qualified teacher. And a lot of people don't know that there's more qualified teachers in public schools than in charter schools. And the thing is, it's not that the teacher's not a good teacher, it's that the teacher is being overwhelmed with all of these issues that a student brings into the classroom that we don't have funding for, like social workers and housing and the basic needs, because we have families that are living under the poverty level. And so, you know, teachers are dealing with those types of things, and emotionally, and burnout, and standards, and tests at third grade and sixth grade. I mean, it's just an overwhelming of stress. And so the real conversation is, okay, we need money, and we need money in our schools, because we need to address these things so that our kids and their needs are met at our schools where we are.
Right, exactly. You hit so many important topics, you know, again, the funding being so important, and people sometimes look, you don't have to, like I say, you don't have to listen to me. You don't have to look at the statistics. You know, some people thought, well, wait a minute, what about 20 by 2020? Las maestras agarraron un aumento, they're doing, I'm like, look, after 20 by 2020, we didn't move the needle at all. We're still 50th in the nation, 924 to 1 per counselor to student. We're 49th in the nation in teacher pay, 48th in the nation in investment per pupil spending. So, you know, and I want to talk about school districts, just very generally about school boards and how, because once that funding comes, and I hope it comes in a big, big way, those school boards are so important, and it's so important for people to get involved in their school boards and to know who's running for school board, do the homework, and elect those pro public education school board members, because that's who's going to you know, put the funds where they need to be. So I wanted to just put that in there, that it's very important. And again, about, I'm going to kind of pivot right now, you know, especially what Veronica is saying about, you know, these families and their needs not being met. And when you take a student out of their community, let's say that the parent can drive that. Let's say that you have a two-person family, one person can drive. That's already a privilege. You're already spending time doing that. But when you're doing that and you're saying, I'm not going to pick my local school because it's no good. Do you know that your public local school affects your property value? I'm sure so many people don't understand that when you're saying, my school's no good, I'm not gonna vote for that bond or override. And again, we want to stay kind of on the general, because we're on the C3 side, and we are, you know, no political affiliation, and it's not to, you know, education shouldn't be political, but it's important to know where this money is coming from. And if you don't vote for your bonds and overrides, you're hurting your own school. If you don't vote for, you know, if you don't fund your schools, you're hurting your own very own community. So Jessica, you want to talk about how, you know, where people might not know that pulling these vouchers, pulling these dollars, they're actually hurting their own communities. What do you think about that?
No, I completely agree. And, you know, I think it's important, you know, that people realize that, because it is impacting our schools. And, you know, I also believe that these children also need to be exposed to different environments. So you're also doing like the community a disservice of not being part of the community. You know, in our school district, Phoenix Elementary, we are open enrollment. So we do have, you know, a percentage that get driven in and, you know, commute into our community. And so they're missing out on developing those friendships outside of the classroom and being part of the community. And that's, you know, what we're missing.
Right. Mm-hmm. How about you, Thomasine? I mean, I also think, you know, with this school choice and not having a choice, sometimes the people that have the choice, right, they can leave, they can go elsewhere. And it sort of is a way for, you know, to take those students and take them to a better school, or, you know, something. What can you tell me about that? So just leaving our you know, our schools are going to be left with only the students that don't have the choice to go elsewhere. So a little bit of that white flight and you know, them having the privilege to get out of there. Do you notice that happening? Do you think that is a problem?
Well, I think that, you know, just as you were saying, when we remove or we make a choice to leave our community to go to another place, another school that's outside the district, that does hurt our community. I think when we, in terms of property value, that's certainly a conversation that needs to happen. We as an Indigenous community, we're not paying property tax. And so, you know, it still requires support. It still requires an understanding for us to be able to, one, be understanding what that really means for us, for our schools, for our students. But it also means that we are talking with family members who live off the reservation, and to share the importance of why, you know, investing in our school system is important. And so I think for me as a community, you know, it's important for us to talk about those things. And I don't see very many parents or just people in general from the community across the board who are attending the school board meetings. And I think that's a disinvestment in itself. And I think that when we talk about how we can invest in education is really important, because that builds community. And that's something that I really value. I love being a part of the community. I love being, you know, just informing people. And I think that's something that I will certainly push. And you know, I'm glad I'm, you know, a part of this, because that's part of the educational outreach that needs to happen for our families and our community.
Absolutely. And you just taught me something, because our funding mechanism is so flawed. Like, you know, like you said, you guys don't even pay property taxes, but your schools still need to be funded. And so it shouldn't be, you know, the system itself is not inherently not equal, because, you know, kids in Scottsdale or people, you know, with higher property values are obviously getting more money. And, you know, one of the things that hooked me initially to start this advocating for public schools is because I'm a teacher, I'm a mom, but I learned that in our Arizona Constitution, it says that our schools will be funded uniformly. It's in the Constitution. And for me, I'm like, hey, if it's in the Constitution, it should be happening. What's going on here? Like, it's in the Constitution. We should have quality public education, uniform. And I'm like, that's not happening. What do you think, Veronica? About
Well, you know, I'm gonna, you know, tell you something. You know, very private, but I'm gonna share this. Personally, I came from the Dysart School District, and mainly from a city where, at that time when I was growing up, the majority of the families that lived in the close knit community were farmers, because they were working in the fields. My mom was a farm worker. And so, you know, I went to school and I got good grades, and, you know, I graduated 10% of my class, and I got a full ride at that time to ASU, to a university.
Yeah.
And when I got there, you know, I was supposed to be smart. Like, I'm supposed to know things, and people that came from other states knew a lot of things that I hadn't even been introduced to.
Right.
And that was very saddening for me. And it impacted me. It even traumatized me. And I don't, you know, and I've never wanted my children to go through the same experience, which is why, you know, I'm involved in these conversations, because I felt it was so unfair. I felt it was sitting in a classroom at a university in 1995, where there wasn't a lot of Latinos going to the university. I was thinking, like, hey, wait a minute, but I got good grades. You know, why don't I know this stuff? I had to basically work harder, triple, to understand the concepts that were being taught to me at the university. Absolutely. And it was difficult. It was very difficult for me. And so this is what some of the barriers that our students are running into, where they don't even have the basic knowledge of writing an essay, or the basic knowledge of reading comprehension, or basic knowledge in math, or those things, because there's disparities in our communities, and we're not paying for more teachers in our schools. And a lot of the things are because we don't have a lot of the ratio between teachers and students
Right.
is not a good ratio. Like I used to register students, in elementary school, and you'd get 35 students to one teacher. And
Yeah.
this is like fifth grade, second grade. There's no way one teacher can handle 35 students and follow all of those students' progress. I mean, some super teachers, yes, they devote their whole life. They don't sleep. They do their lecture and they do everything, the same night. And
Right.
so parents, we have to be understanding that, we don't see this unless we're exposed to it, or unless we're volunteers at the school, unless we've been working at a school. We're not exposed to this. But the reality of it is that it's not only that our teachers are underfunded, it's that there's not enough funding for more teachers to alleviate some of this stress that's put upon them.
Right. The class sizes were pre-pandemic. I mean, in my school district, there were 38, 40 kids in a classroom, it's breaking, I mean, breaking the system isn't even cut. That's just the tip of the iceberg of, like you said, of what is needed. And so much that, again, it goes back to the funding and the money, right? And people will say, well, money's not going to fix everything, but it'll sure start to help. I mean,
Yeah.
I wanted to say thank you, Veronica, for sharing that story. You and I have a very similar story, okay? I didn't graduate at the top 10% of my class, but I still went to college. But when I got there, I went to the U of A. I had no business. And I quickly found out, and the U of A sent me a little letter saying, you girl, bye-bye. I couldn't cut it. I didn't have the grades. I had to go. But then I was determined to come back, and I went to a community college and I worked hard. And I came back and I did it, but I had to jump a lot of barriers. So thank you so much, for mentioning that. And that was pre-pandemic. That was before. So that was, back in the day, Arizona was better funded. Imagine what our students are dealing with now. Our teachers are dealing with now, and so and still the money's, besides us not being funded, we take money away from the system. So I want to talk, I'm going to come back to Jessica and talk a little bit about ESA vouchers. Have you heard about ESA vouchers? Jessica, what do you know about them?
Sure. So I learned about the empowerment, what is it? Empowerment
Scholarship account. Yep. Empowerment. It sounds so great. Doesn't it sound so good?
It does. And I learned it, from Save Our Schools. And I really learned, how they were being utilized. And so essentially, it's just public funds being utilized to fund our private schools. And so some of the individuals and families that are using the vouchers, already have the opportunity to fund their own way to private school. So in a way, it's creating and extending that divide of,
Right.
the haves and the have-nots. And that's, what we're experiencing in our public, school districts, is that all that money is just going to what is already funded.
Right. Well, so, our legislators will tell us, well, we're spending a bunch of money, we're putting money into this bucket. And, I mean, a big chunk of our budget goes into education, but they don't tell us how the money's coming out on the bottom of the bucket in the holes. And so, you mentioned that ESA vouchers started for a specific group of students, special education students, because that was going to help them in case they couldn't get what they needed at their school, to take them. But then every year, incrementally, they've pushed another, now it's for foster kids and military families, wards of the state, people in DRF funded schools, people that live on the reservation. Now you can take the ESA voucher and take it to states. We passed that, saying now you can take money. Arizona do people know that their Arizona taxpayer dollars can now be used to pay for private schools? If you border Arizona, any reservation, if you're on the reservation and you border another state and you have an ESA, now you can take it to New Mexico, Utah, any place like that passed. And so they don't tell you, how they're taking this money away from the system. And look, if you're a special education student and you need extra services, then you should be getting them. But the reality is that the majority of our special education students are getting services in our public schools because private schools and charters can turn them away. It's expensive. Some of our kids have very high needs. And so they could just be like, nope, we sorry, can't help you, bye-bye. And our kids have to be educated in public schools, yet we're losing $264 million in ESA vouchers, something like that. That was last year and it's growing. What do you think about ESA vouchers, Thomasine?
Well, it sounds very disappointing.
I concur.
It's I think it's, you know, I don't know much about it. This is something that, you know, as a parent had no idea was even happening. But I believe that when anytime that there is limitations, especially for students with disabilities, what are we saying? What is the message there? The message is that, you know, there's others that are more important, or, you know, and that's not what we should be doing to our students. Our students should always come first. And that means here within our communities, here within the Arizona. And, you know, that is something that I think is, it's going to require all of us to work together to change. My one thought on this is those who represent us at the state level, you know, because for whatever reason, they're not making the connections, and right. There's greater influences that are pushing them to allow for this devastation of our education to happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You hit it right on the head. Hit it on the head. And you know, again, when you hear about these ESA vouchers, it's almost like school choice. It sounds kind of like a good idea, but there's so many things they don't tell us. And one of you hit the nail on the head also saying, look, I can show up if I have the privilege, if I can get up and drive my kid and figure out how I'm going to get my kid. I have my voucher. I'm going to get to that private school. That private school costs $15,000. I have 5. So who's going to pay for the other $10,000? Well, like Jessica said, families that can already afford to go there. So when we look at who's using vouchers, families that can already afford to go to these schools and really using these ESA vouchers does not show that you do better academically. It actually shows the opposite. So if even there were some sign that you would say, okay, well, you know, it shows better results, but it doesn't. And it really is sort of a slap to those families that want to take the voucher, that get the voucher, but then they show up at this private school and the private school says, okay, great. Well, where are you going to get the other $10,000? The family's like, oh, what are you talking about? I have this $5,000 voucher. What do you think about ESA vouchers, Veronica?
Yeah, well, just echoing what you're all saying, because I'm looking at the income bracket here. So when we look at it, in order for you to apply, like you're talking about for this voucher, you have to meet the requirements of like the disability and the military and all this, right? But then you look at the household size for one student, the annual gross income has to be $23,606, and the annual gross income maximum has to be $43,671. That's what this chart that I'm looking at says for this scholarship. Now, how many of our parents that live in our communities and in impoverished communities, like moms that are like housekeepers, the cleaning ladies, work at restaurants, how many of those moms make $23,000? How many of our single dads make $23,000? Not a lot. So you're right. When you're talking about that this is specifically for a group of people, the group of people that, you know, this is targeting are people, like you said, people that can already afford to go to another school. And so if you can afford to go to another school, if you can afford to pay the gas to travel and take your child to another school, if you've been traumatized like myself and you want to drive, because I do drive, you know, but I do that because I believe that, you know, we have to fix, you know, the system. And that's why, like, I want to advocate for that, because I want people to go to their own home school. But I also understand that people want a good education for their child, and it's not fair. So it's not fair for students not to get the education just because they don't live in a rich neighborhood.
Right.
So, we need to fix that, and that needs to be this state's priority. And Governor Ducey needs to get on that, because we need to make the education in the state priority. Our kids deserve better. Arizona deserves better. We deserve better, and we need to
Yes.
get there. And we're not going to get there if parents don't show up. Like Thomasine was talking about school board meetings. We need to be at school board meetings. We need to respond to when they send us a communication that there's going to be some allocation of funds for something. We need to be at that school, and we need to be part of the voices that are being heard there, because if our voices are not being heard and we're not there to advocate for our own children, then we're not going to have a solution.
Absolutely. You said it. You said it. You said it. And we're voting right now, right? We're voting right
Yes,
now.
let's vote.
You have to do the homework, people. Find those candidates that support public education. And school boards right now. I mean, I know more people are tuning in because they're making life and death situations. I mean, these school board members, they didn't have any idea. Some school board members just think, okay, I'm going to be a school board member because maybe it's a great springboard to the next. Some school board members didn't really get in because they wanted to represent their students. They just got in because it's the next step to the next, political whatever. And now they're making decisions about life and death. Our school district, man, they were making decisions, and I don't envy what position they're in, because they have to be in it for the community, for the schools. And they sent us back. They did the best that they could. We went back hybrid. We went back with precautions. We went back hospital. And now we're back home. Everybody's back online. We had 4 cases at our school, and our school district, our school board was doing the best that they could. They were following the science. I don't blame them. But if we had better direction from the state at the top level, with the governor and the legislators giving us better direction, we wouldn't have this school district opening and that one not. These guys are online, but these guys are hybrid.
Yes.
I'm teaching concurrent right now, or I was teaching in person. It was enough to make you cry as a teacher. Literally, I would have to be like, excuse me, Ms. Lavani's gonna cry for a second off camera, because it was impossible. It was traumatizing as a teacher to try to do the in-person, the technology, the hybrid, anywho. So we need to elect. Arizona has got to get funding, and we care about funding. Time and time again, our voters care about funding. So we're kind of getting, close to running out of time. But anything I want to say about ESA vouchers, or and something I want to just harp on. I know we kind of skipped off on the Spanish, pero no se me preocupen, mi gente de español. Para la siguiente, we will be doing it. It was just such an important topic, but voting, and really are a lot of resources out there. And if you want to know more about education funding, I know none of us wake up in the morning and go, oh my gosh, today I want to learn about education funding. Let me call Raquel. But it's really important stuff, and Save Our Schools Arizona Network has fabulous tools. We have webinars that we can give you for free online. And you just got to learn, because once you kind of learn about it, like you all have done, you're like, uh-oh, we got to keep working. We got to find people. We got to tell people, because it is the investment, and time is in the investment. So you all are investing your time. You're not just, saying, oh, this is a problem, because what you're doing today, what you're doing for your communities is a true investment in your community. So I thank you for that. And I just wanted to, let you each take a minute to, just give us any other closing thoughts that you have, or, anything you'd like to say. And once again, Save Our Schools Arizona Network thanks you, and thanks everyone for tuning in, because again, not World Series, I'm not to the World Series, but really important topics for our communities. What do you think, Jessica, before we sign off?
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this conversation. You know, like you were saying, it's so important to get into all those details because that's when we really start to understand why we're being impacted so greatly. And so, yeah, I really appreciate being part of this conversation and I look forward to continuing our connection.
Thank you so much. And what I wanted to say, you bring up a point is that these conversations are important and because they don't make it easy to understand. You think education funding is complicated if they just said, oops, this is kind of complicated. I don't think so. I don't think it was actually accidentally like, oops. They keep it sort of like this so that you're going, what is an empowerment scholarship account? What is an STO? How do the student tuition organization? Well, that sounds, like a great idea. That's a whole other show. Thomasine, what can you tell us as we close out? Thanks again for joining us.
Well, first, thank you very much. Thank you to Save Our Schools. Um, it's important for all of our students to have an education. And when I say all of our students, that's every single student here in Arizona, because no one should have to be forced to leave. Everyone should be able to get the education right where they are, and their families receive the support that whatever it is that's needed. And I believe that as a community, we work together to reach that. It can happen. And for me, I want every student, every child to have an education, no matter the language, no matter the color, everyone.
Absolutely, Thomasine. Amen. I mean, yes, agree. I absolutely agree with that it shouldn't matter. And I've said that so many times before. It shouldn't matter north, south, east, or west. Every student in Arizona should have a quality public education for all, same across the board. Says it in our Constitution. Veronica, what can you tell us as we close out?
Okay, I'm just Spanish and English, en español.
Sí.
Es muy importante que nos involucremos en nuestras escuelas, nos involucremos en votar. Si nosotros como madres no podemos votar, pues tenemos hijos que
Sí.
pueden votar. Entonces, tenemos que decirles a nuestros hijos que si queremos una educación mejor para sus hijos, para los hijos de ellos, para los nietos, tenemos que involucrarnos en las decisiones de las personas que están en estos comités de las escuelas. Y para poder hacer esto, tenemos que escoger a las personas que tienen experiencia y saben lo que están haciendo. Y el voto es muy importante y involucrarse es muy importante. So in English, it's very important for us as parents to vote and to exercise our voice so that we get school board members that know what they're doing, in regards to public schools and funding. And it's also important for us to teach our children that it's important to vote. If we are unable to vote, then we should explain to our children the importance of that and the importance of exercising their voices when it comes to public school and education, so that all students and every student has opportunities to learn in this state, and so that we can all feel better that as parents, we could feel better as parents that we're doing the best that we can to give our kids the best that we can, and sometimes it doesn't feel that way when, we don't have the resources. And so voting.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to say, kind of go to Spanish myself a little bit. Como estaba diciendo Verónica, que si ustedes no pueden votar ahorita, también quiero que sepan que de todas maneras deben de tener la información, que no es que no puedo votar, pero de todas maneras debes de saber cómo se está gastando tu dinero, porque si pagas impuestos aquí, tu dinero se está usando, y ahorita si no puedes votar, como dijo Verónica, habla con tus hijos, habla con tus nietos, habla con tus sobrinos, el vecino. La elección termina el 3 de noviembre. Es cuando se termina. Ahorita la elección está siguiendo en pie. Si quieres votar, ahorita puedes votar temprano. So the election is happening right now. If you're not able to vote right now, you can still have the information. I run into people a lot of times that say, oh, well, I can't vote. Well, you certainly should still know what's happening with your schools, what's happening with your community, and you are worthy of the information. And the election is happening right now. So, November 3rd is when the election ends. We don't know what can happen between now and then. Your car could break down on the 3rd and you were gonna go vote. Make a plan, get those ballots in, because if you get it in and it gets counted, I'll share a little secret with you all. The calls and the texts and all of that stops. It's just a little back end. You know, I'm a text banker. And so if you want all of that stuff to stop, the phone calls and all the nonsense, turn in your ballot and they leave you alone. That's a little, a little back end. Pero de todas maneras, amigos, vamos a estar con ustedes de nuevo en 2 semanas. Charla Educativa is going to every 2 weeks. I am now teaching and doing a lot of other things. So I'm going to have some inside perspective from the teacher's point of view, which is exhaustion. Entonces, por eso vamos a estar cada 2 semanas. Estoy ahorita como suplente en una clase de español, pero Charla Educativa con Raquel va a seguir. Acuérdense que tenemos presentaciones gratis para ustedes. Comuníquense conmigo, comuníquense con sosarizonanetwork.org. Mándenme un mensaje por Facebook y podemos hacer las presentaciones gratis para ustedes, no importa qué tantas gentes, para que aprendan más. Es sin afiliación política, es sin fin de lucro. Entonces, les doy muchísimas gracias a mis invitadas. I wanted to say thank you again to my guests. Always reach out to Save Our Schools Arizona Network if you all need any presentations, anybody to bring information to your communities. We're going to keep on keeping on until Arizona's schools are fully funded. And thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Muchísimas gracias por estar con nosotros y los vemos en 2 semanas. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks. With Charla Educativa, we'll be having some fantastic topic for you then. Gracias y que tengan muy buena tarde. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you
so much.
Bye.
Buenas tardes. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.